Hi, I'm Wendy Yi, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 Puzzly games. Now, when I say puzzle, I don't necessarily mean like a jigsaw puzzle where you're pushing pieces together, but instead I mean like mechanisms that are really interesting that you have to figure out. You have to kind of work your way through to discover it. Some of those are spatial with cool polyominoes and pieces that you're placing on locations, and other ones are just mechanisms that, you're trying to get from point A to point C and you're trying to figure out how to get there. And so let's go ahead and begin. My number 10 is Wormholes. This is a cool spacey game with that theme of teleporting from one side of the map to another. So as you're exploring out, you're dropping these little wormholes and you have to decide, where am I going to drop the first one? Like, where do I want to come back to? But then also, where do I want to expand out to that I will actually use that again in the future? And so you're trying to hop along through this map as you expand out and across. And so there's just a lot of fun decisions going on there. There's some cool interaction. And so I just really enjoy that puzzle of where am I going to put these so that I can hop where I need to hop very easily and quickly. So that's my number 10, Wormholes. My number 9 is Heirs. It kind of looks like a Carcassonne game because you're laying out tiles. But what's interesting is that the tiles that I own face me, the tiles that you own face you, but we're making a map together. And there's some interesting interaction and puzzle behind choosing which tiles we're going to get. So there's this interesting, almost like patchwork rondelle of choosing these tiles. And the way that you pay for them is all dependent on how many troops you keep in the rondelle area versus when you put them on the map. They can work for resources, both locations, but they also allow you extra movement. Like, there's just some really interesting puzzle and decision between where am I going to put the tiles spatially, but also where am I going to put my troops? How am I going to lay them on the map and move them on the map so that I can expand out? How am I going to place these tiles for specific scoring abilities? And where do I need them? So there's just a lot of fun stuff going on. I really enjoy the puzzle. I think that it's tons of fun. So that's my number 9, Heirs. My number 8 is Marvel Remix. This is a handcrafting game where you're essentially like drawing cards and picking up cards, and you're trying to make your set of hand the perfect superhero story. So you want to have a hero, you want to have an ally, you want to have a villain, but then all the rest of the cards in your hands can be kind of any of those things. They can be items, they can be stuff, and all the cards interact with each other. It's very fantasy realms like how one card will score other cards in your hand, and hopefully they will mutually score previous cards that we scored before. And so there's just such an interesting interaction. You may have Captain America who wants lots of heroes and he wants his shield, and if you can get all that, you can get lots of points. But you might have a villain in your hand that hates heroes, and so you're losing points for heroes, and you have to make choices of what you're going to keep, what are you going to get rid of. So Marvel Remix, fun, easy, simple card game, but has really good puzzle to it as you're crafting that hand. So that's my number 8. My number 7 is Catherine, Cities of the Zarina. And what I really enjoy about this is the card play. So you are playing cards at the top of your player area for their actions, but their actions don't trigger off until you play a card of the matching color underneath them. So each round you're going to play a couple to your top of your tableau area, and you're going to play a couple to the bottom. But there's going to be actions that you don't use that are just kind of there for future rounds and you're prepping. But then there's definitely those cards at the bottom that are essentially just getting discarded. And so you have to make those choices because every card is good. Every card does a wonderful thing. And so you have to think like, what strategies am I leaning into? Do I want to gain more cities on the map? Do I want to move up the crown track? Do I want to just get straight up good, solid victory points? Do I want to discard cards? Do I want big hand, little hand? There's a lot of different choices and a lot of different stuff. And so puzzling out where you put those cards, when you play them, how you play them, I think that it's a fun puzzle, even though there's not like tactile dexterity or any of that spatial stuff going on. So I think it's tons of fun. So Catherine is my number 7. My number 6 is my Shelfie. This has a really cool spatial element. So the tiles that you are picking and trying to put in this nice little, it almost looks like a Connect 4 grid, but you're building up a little Calig shelf. And the way that you collect those tiles is very spatially oriented. They have to be available, so they have to have sides free so that you can actually like pick them up and collect them. And you can only collect 1 through 3 a turn. But then also you're building that nice little shelf. And there's rules about like you have to only build up one column, and they have to, gravity is affected, so they have to build upwards. And so it's really interesting because there's different objectives that you're racing towards, because if you're the first one to complete them, you get more points. But also you're trying to be the first one to fill up your entire shelf. You're trying to make connections of similar colors grouped together. So there's just a lot of puzzly, very spatial elements going on that I think is a lot of fun. So my Shelfie, great game, good puzzle. That's my number 6. My number 5 is Foundations of Rome. This is an interesting game that reminds me a lot of New York 1901, which is just a longtime favorite of mine. And so you're basically collecting plots of land, and as you collect them, you can then build buildings on them. The more land that you have all pieced together, the bigger the buildings that you can get, usually worth more points. But also the buildings have such interesting interaction, because you may build a building that gives you money or may give you points based on all the buildings around it, including other people's. And so there's a lot of fun, positive interaction going on. There's also a little bit of trying to steal spaces that you think people want so they can't build like giant coliseums and stuff. So there's a lot of fun puzzle in the way that it scores, in the way that you place out your buildings, and in the way you interact. So I love it. There's a lot of good stuff there in Foundations of Rome. So that is my number 5. My number 4 is Rise. And this is a game that is tracks on tracks on tracks. So as you move on tracks, sometimes they have you move on other tracks. Sometimes you get to progress more and you get more income and you get more discounts. And then sometimes you are destroying the environment, or you're making your citizens very unhappy, and they start, losing points, and you start not being able to do as many actions because you're hurting yourself, you're hurting the environment. So it's just very interesting the way that they all interact. It's a fun puzzle, and the action selection is really cool. As you are choosing what actions you want, there are a bunch of cards laid out, but between each action is a little event card. And so if you want to pay very little money and take actions that are very close to the front, you don't get all of those advanced events. That could be great movement on tracks, but also could be negative movement on tracks. Or you could progress down, you could pay lots of extra money to do those higher up actions that may be the ones that you want, and get those cool events or those terrible events. So there's such a fun puzzle of making those choices on those cards, of choosing what tracks you're going to invest in. Are you going to do some engine building at the beginning, or are you going to move up on other tracks that give you a lot of extra other track bonuses? And so it's good choices, good puzzle, lots going on. So that is Rise. That's my number 4. My number 3 is Next Station London. There's so many good roll and writes, and so I just had to pick one. This is the one I picked because they're all great puzzles. I really enjoy the idea of having simultaneous or like similar card play that flips over, and then people make decisions, and you just see how those decisions change. And so Next Station London, everyone starts in a different location because everyone has a different colored pencil that they begin with on their map. And throughout the course of the game, you're going to swap those colored pencils, and you're going to start different colored routes. Those routes can interconnect in certain ways, but then other ways they can't cross. And so you have all this kind of puzzly rules that you're trying to figure out, how do I get around and build all of my subway stations really neatly and nicely without trapping myself in corners. And I want to expand, but I also want to localize. Like, there's just a lot of decisions. And so I really enjoy Next Station London. That's my number 3. My number 2 is Monolith. This is the most polyomino puzzly game that I have on this list. And what's really cool is everyone's building this monolith in front of you. So essentially this like brick of blocks made out of all these different polyomino shaped pieces. But what's cool about it is that each side has a particular color that you're trying to score. So you're trying to get those colors to show on those sides. So it's a very like 3D aspect to this game. And so as you look like at my back face, I may want to have oranges. So throughout the game, I'm going to bid how many oranges I think I'm going to be able to have showing there by the end of the game when I finish my monolith. Whereas I also bid a different number for my dark blue or my light blue. And so there's a lot of really cool choices. Everybody can kind of look at each other's 3D model and kind of fight against for those particular colors. So there's a lot of fun. You've got the physical puzzle as well as that kind of betting puzzle going on of kind of guessing what you're going to be able to finish and complete in the future. And there's a fun rondelle that adds a little bit of interaction as well. So that is my number 2, Monolith. My number 1 is Acropolis, and this is so much fun. The puzzle is that you are building a city wide as well as tall. So there's ways to add multipliers. Every color of tile scores a little bit differently. You've got some that want to be grouped together, some that want to be on the outside of your city, some that want to be completely surrounded by other tiles. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. As you build up, it adds extra multipliers. As you build wide, it just adds more surface area and more tiles that you can visually see and therefore will score. Really enjoy the puzzle, and I love how quick and simple it is. So Acropolis is my number 1. Thanks for joining me for my top 10 Puzzly games of 2022. I had a blast playing them all. I hope that you do as well, and I hope you enjoy your Winter Spectacular. I'm Wendy Yi. Have a fabulous day.